On Thursday, Democrats introduced a bill based on the Biden administration's immigration priorities that would provide a path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants. Hello and a very warm welcome to WION VOA co-production, our special presentation on US stories in collaboration with Voice of America. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Now, officials in the US will begin processing Central American asylum seekers who were turned back and forced to remain in Mexico under a controversial Trump-era policy that has now been revoked. VOA's White House correspondent Patsy Vidakuswara brings you the story.
On Friday, U.S. officials will begin to process up to 25,000 migrants turned away under the Trump-era migrant protection protocols. Good news for asylum seekers at this shelter on the Texas border with Mexico.
Our miracle is about to come true. We are very happy about it.
On Thursday, Democratic lawmakers introduced a bill to add resources to handle the backlog of asylum seekers. The U.S. Citizenship Act will also increase caps for green card lotteries, change the word alien to non-citizen in U.S. laws, and provide a path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants.
So this is a values-based but also economically beneficial. And as I have always said, immigrants coming to our country, with newcomers coming with their hopes and dreams and aspirations, with their optimism and determination to make the future better for their families, well, those are American traits.
Aimed to counteract 4 years of Donald Trump's hardline border policies, the bill is unlikely to receive enough Republican support in the Senate.
It is a very radical bill in that it greatly opens the border to additional waves of illegal immigration. It makes the government a participant in illegal immigration. And then it also eliminates grounds for removal on the back end. So not only would more illegal aliens be coming into the U.S., we would not be deporting very many.
The bill reflects immigration priorities that President Joe Biden introduced hours after he was sworn in, but a lack of bipartisan support could force it to be broken up into individual pieces, including provisions for essential workers who work in industries critical during the pandemic, such as food supply and agriculture, and for dreamers or people who came illegally as children. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki acknowledged that Democrats may need to compromise, but signaled that Biden wants broad immigration reform legislation.
The president feels that all of these requirements that are in the bill, these components of the bill, are what makes it comprehensive. They all need to be addressed. That's why he proposed them together.
The administration says it is committed to humane immigration policies. But with Trump-era pandemic-related restrictions still in place, the majority of migrants at the border will still be turned away.
What we need to do is take a look at the situation at the border for migrants and approach it from a science-related viewpoint and not from a political perspective designed to turn away migrants. We hope that the president will relax the restrictions at the border, which public health experts are said are not necessary, because it's important to resume asylum processing while people are desperate.
Earlier this month, Biden announced an increase in annual refugee admissions, which fell to a historic low under Trump.
Up to 125,000 persons for the first full fiscal year of the Biden-Harris administration.
Immigration reform is a key campaign promise for Biden, one that he is eager to pursue while Democrats hold the majority in Congress. Patsy Vidakuswara, VOA News.
Let's get a deeper sense of understanding of this entire issue of immigration. For that, I'm joined in by Voice of America's Ira Melman, who's joining me live from Washington, D.C. at this hour. A very warm welcome to you, Ira. Now, immigration reform has come before U.S. lawmakers many times without much success, as many may see it. Why is this so difficult?
It is so difficult because how divided this country is, and especially has been divided for so many years, decades as a matter of fact, when it comes to the problem, as many see it, of immigration. So that is why, as Patsy mentioned in her piece, that President Biden, a longtime negotiator, he spent decades in the U.S. Senate, knows many senators, has said that he will negotiate and he will move. He will drop parts of it if necessary to get this passed. That is not usually what he's done so far in his short time in office, but this is what everyone is expecting, because on this vote, the Democrats are going to need at least 10 Republicans to pass the Biden bill. So what's going to happen is that they're going to remix it and re-put it together. Then we'll see what happens. But again, it's very difficult. And as far as people crossing the border, they're gathering at the Mexico border right now. But again, as you heard, because of pandemic restrictions, most of them are not going to be allowed to cross that border for a while.
Right. Another hot issue that is raging on in the U.S. is, of course, the issue of anti-Asian bigotry. Let's quickly have a look at that report. Ira, I'll come back to you for more details on that news story. Now, rights groups in the United States say they are seeing a rise in hate speech and attacks against Asian Americans since the coronavirus pandemic began last year. Several recent violent incidents involving older Asian Americans have increased worries over anti-Asian bigotry. Isha Sarai brings us more.
Asians against violence. Violence against us.
Protesters have taken to the streets to speak out against hate following a sharp uptick in attacks against Asian Americans over the past month, most recently in Oakland, California.
It could have been my mother, or it could have been my father or my grandparent that was attacked in the driveway.
Oakland police have responded by shifting more resources into the city's Chinatown area.
We've shifted resources to our Chinatown community. We've put our command posts in the Chinatown community, moving it from different locations so that it's seen as a presence throughout Chinatown. We've increased our routine patrols in our Chinatown area.
Reported attacks on Asian Americans have been steadily rising since the beginning of the coronavirus pandemic, which former President Trump called the China virus because of its origins in Wuhan.
We do know that the rise in anti-Asian racism and attacks against our community over the past year has had devastating impacts.
More than 2,800 incidents of racism and discrimination against Asian Americans in the U.S. have been reported over the past year to the organization Stop AAPI Hate. President Joe Biden signed an executive order last month aimed at combating racial discrimination against Asian Americans.
He is concerned about the discrimination against the actions against the Asian American community.
Most of the reported incidents against Asian Americans since last March were cases involving verbal harassment or shunning, while about 9% of incidents reported physical assaults. Isha Sarai, VOA News, Washington.
Let's quickly go back to Ira for a sense of perspective on this news story. Now, Ira, is this rash of violence and bigotry against Asian Americans limited only to the U.S. West Coast?
It is not limited to the West Coast, but it does seem that most of the incidents, thousands of them, as a matter of fact, have taken place in the West Coast, going all the way back to the Second World War. After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, just days later, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the president at the time, opened internment camps where Japanese Americans were sent and stayed there for the war. And that was pretty much not the start of it, but what was to come. But the answer to your question is no, it is not limited to the West Coast, especially after, as mentioned, the outbreak of violence throughout the United States in many areas, especially when it comes to race and segregation, and attacks have increased over the past 4 years or so.
Right. Ira, how long have discriminatory actions been taking place in the United States?
Well, we can go all the way back. For a century ago, the San Francisco School Board had a segregated Chinese primary school for Chinese children. And I'm sure you know of Ellis Island. That's the symbol of America's immigration history. There's a place called Angel Island in San Francisco Bay. And that now is a state park and a place for people to have weddings and things like that. But many years ago, that was a detention area for Chinese. So the answer to your question is absolutely not. It's going way back. Many instances of what has happened as far as the Asian Americans and actions taken against.
Certainly a Herculean challenge over there for the Joe Biden administration to tackle as far as racism is concerned. Having said that, thank you so much, Ira Millman, for joining our broadcast today. WION is now available in your country. Download the app now. Get all the news on the move.